Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to call the meeting to order. This is the Pennington County Planning Commission, July 24th, 2023 meeting. Recommendations of the Planning Commission on certain items from this agenda will be considered by the Board of Commissioners at their regular meeting on August 1st, 2023 at 10:30 a.m. And as I usually say, that 10:30 is an approximate time when they review planning items. Very first thing is roll call, and we've got a complete roster today. Jerry, did everyone have an opportunity to review the minutes of July 10th, 2023 meeting minutes? If you did, the chair would address the motion.
I move we approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the July 10th, 2023 meeting. Before I say discussion, I figured I better look. I thought I found one little boogie boo, but I may be wrong. I didn't. Discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now we're moving on to the agenda. Same question. Did everyone have an opportunity to review the agenda that was submitted in their packet for the meeting? If so, the chair would address the motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the agenda as submitted for the July 24th, 2023 meeting. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. On to the consent agenda.
Good morning,
Thank you,
Commissioners. Brittany Molitor, Planning Director. The following items have been placed on the consent agenda for action to be taken on all items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent agenda by any Planning Commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration. The findings of this Planning Commission on certain items from this agenda are recommendations to the Pennington County Board of Commissioners, who will make their final decision. Item number 3 is conditional use permit review CU 0118 for Randy and June Gliza to review a bed and breakfast as a home occupation in a rural residential district. And staff recommends approval of the review of conditional use permit CU 0118 with conditions. Item number 4 is conditional use permit amendment review CU 0435 for Chris Peterson to review a storage facility, a single-family residence to be used as a caretaker residence, and an office shop building in a commercial district. And staff recommends approval of the review of conditional use permit amendment CU 0435 with conditions. Item number 5 is conditional use permit review CU 1816 for David and Karen Maudlin to review a vacation home rental in a rural residential district. And staff recommends approval of the review of conditional use permit CU 1816 with conditions. Item number 6 is conditional use permit review CU 1819 for Jerry and Carrie Ann Casper to review a guest house in a rural residential district. And staff recommends approval of the review of conditional use permit CU 1819 with conditions. Item number 7 is conditional use permit review CU 1927 for Jerry and Carrie Ann Casper to review an existing single-family residence to be used as a bed and breakfast in a rural residential district. And staff recommends to continue the review of conditional use permit CU 1927 to the August 14th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting in order for the applicant to address staff's concerns. Item number 8 is conditional use permit review CU 2113 for Heath Freeman to review living in an existing residence while building a new single-family residence and to allow the existing residence to remain as a ranch hand residence in an agriculture district. And staff recommends approval of the review of conditional use permit CU 21-13 with conditions. And item number 9 is major plan unit development amendment review PU 1502 for Deerfield Park Condominiums Council of Co-Owners to review an existing plan unit development. Staff recommends approval of the review of major plan unit development amendment PU 15-02 with conditions.
Thank you, Brittany. First item would be, does anyone have any clerical errors they noted in those items of the consent calendar? Second one would be, the staff would like to have any pulled? Would the commission care to have any items pulled? Anyone from the audience care to have those first one of those first 9 items, I guess 3 to 9, pulled? Hearing none, Chair to address a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move. Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as submitted, items 3 through 9. Discussion from the audience. Hearing none. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. On to item number 10.
Item number 10, sorry, a lot of paperwork here. Kelsey Roush, Planning Department. Items 10, 11, and 12 are road namings for the Preston Family LLC. I'm not sure which one is first, honestly.
Blue Heron.
Blue Heron, okay, that's what I thought. So Blue Heron Road, all 3 road names were approved by the Ted in the 911 dispatch center. Staff is recommending approval. The applicant does plan to deed off a lot of lots out here, so we're requiring him to name his roads. He is in the process of building the roads. Staff did run out there and had rained, so it was not a good idea to drive the roads quite yet. They're pretty rough as of right now, so. Any questions, Barney?
Any questions for Kelsey? All right. Anyone here in the audience that care to speak on this item? Chair to address a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve proposed road naming to Blue Heron Road. Discussion from the audience. From the commission, hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. On to item number 11.
Again, this is a road
Mr.
naming.
Chair,
Yes.
move to approve road name Porcupine Road.
All right.
Second.
All right, now, let's make sure we get the right name. Is item number 11 the Porcupine one?
Yes.
Okay. Chair wanted to make sure you hadn't flipped the pages fast enough yet, you guys. All right. Motion to approve proposed road naming Porcupine Road. Discussion from the audience, from the commission. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. We're on to item number 11.
12.
12.
Well.
See, I hadn't flipped fast enough, had I? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve road name Marmot Road as recommended by staff.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve, per the staff submission, proposed road naming Marmot Road. Discussion from the audience. From the commission. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now we're on to item number 13.
Megan Talmadge, planner. Agenda item number 13 is conditional use permit 23-24 and is to allow an accessory dwelling unit on the subject property. The applicant and owner is Walter and Barbara Digman, and their agent is Elizabeth Digman. The location is 13260 Klondike Road, and the lot size is 15.66 acres. The current zoning is agriculture district, and the existing land use is residential district. Zoning ordinance lists 7 criteria that the planning commission may consider in their review of conditional use permit applications. They're listed on screen. And in the interdepartmental review, it was noted that an address must be posted on both the single-family residence and accessory dwelling unit, and the applicant will be building a new on-site wastewater treatment system for the ADU. This was a previous house that is being remodeled. And staff finds no significant issues with the request, so recommends approval with 15 conditions.
Questions for Megan? I do have, I think, and this is your applicant, the Dingmans. They are here. Would they care to come up? You're not obligated to unless you want to, if you'd like to. Okay. For right now, they're gonna. Any other questions for Megan? Chair, consider a motion.
Move to approve. Second. Conditional use 23-24.
Moved and seconded to approve conditional use permit 23-24 per staff's recommendation with 15 conditions. Is that correct? Discussion. Anyone from the audience would like to involve in discussion? You have to come up. Please introduce yourself just for the record, and Megan can show you the conditions there if you'd like to quickly.
Craig Osmond. I also live off Klondike Road.
Is there something in specific you're looking for?
No,
Okay.
just curiosity.
We'll give you a moment to go ahead and look at it.
Or just take that
Okay, so these are the conditions here
under recommendation.
and here.
Yep.
Okay, I'll take a quick read. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion from the audience? From the commission? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. On to item number 14.
Agenda item number 14 is conditional use permit CU 23-23. It is to allow an accessory dwelling unit on the subject property. The owner and applicant is Ryan and Rhonda Kelly. Location is 23340 First Thunder Road. Lot size is 20 acres. Current zoning is agriculture, and the existing land use is residential. There is 100-year floodplain on the property. Zoning ordinance, the 7 criteria that we consider in approval, they're listed on screen. And in the interdepartmental review, there was a comment from addressing that the address must be posted on both structures, and from the county floodplain manager that if there's any work done in the floodplain, a floodplain development permit is required. The ADU will connect to an existing on-site wastewater treatment system. And currently in place of the ADU, there is an unoccupied recreational vehicle. Staff doesn't find any issues with this request, so recommends approval with 14 conditions.
Okay, Megan. Questions for Megan?
I have one.
Go ahead.
You've got the picture of the site of proposed ADU. How close is the floodplain to that?
The floodplain is actually on the southeastern portion of the property. So, I guess, can you see where my mouse is on? Yes. So it kind of goes up this way.
So it's nowhere near this way?
No, it is not.
Okay. Yeah, that's the only thing I had. Thank you.
Any other questions for Megan? That was my questions. Good one, Mike. And then you indicated, it looked like in the one picture that RV was being used. It had a deck and everything else, it looked like.
Yeah.
And that's going to be removed?
Yep, that is the location of
right.
where the ADU will be.
Okay. Any other questions for Megan? From the audience, anybody here to speak on this item? Chair to address a motion.
Move approval of 2323, CU 2323.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve conditional use permit 23-23 per staff's recommendation with 14 conditions. Discussion from the audience. From the commission. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. On to item number 15. We've got you again, Megan. Thank you.
It's pretty
You
much the whole
stood in for
meeting.
Cody today, huh? Thank you.
All right. Agenda item 15 is Comprehensive Plan Amendment CA 23-06, and it is to change the future land use from rural residential district to low-density residential district. The applicant is Adam and Sharon Weaver, and their agent is Sarah Cheddar. This is located on 23679 Straddle Rim Drive, and the proposed change will be on 0.74 acre. The current zoning is rural residential district and the existing land use is residential. This item was last heard on the June 26th meeting. The preliminary subdivision plan did not include any improvements to Aeronauts Way where they would be getting access, and per Pennington County Ordinance 14 standards, the minimum width for an easement serving more than 2 lots is 66 feet. And so staff recommends to deny Comprehensive Plan Amendment CA 23-06 without prejudice.
Questions for Megan? I've got one. In your infrastructure on page 4 of 5, and it's just a kind of a clarification. In other words, the water company apparently has brought, what do you want to call it, curb stop
Yeah.
to the property already.
Yep, so there is a curb stop to the current residents on the property, but there's also a second curb stop to the area that they're wanting to subdivide.
Okay. And the other thing was, and you've already done it, you guys supported your opposition of this based upon infrastructure. I guess my biggest problem is that property changes hands in the future. People die, people pass away, they leave it to their family, they sell it to other people before it. And this small particular lot versus the rest of the lots out there just seems like it's almost like a spot type of zoning. We're throwing that zoning, that little bit of parcel into a small. I realize, a half a mile away, there's some that are that zoning, but that's just not what I think is a good idea. People that are property owners get concerned about all sorts of uses, and you do not but have limited discretion on advising people of their property uses through even zoning. And now we've got a small lot in amongst these other lots that are zoned totally different. That's where my opposition lies, not the infrastructure. It's the future. And that's what we call this, is a planning commission and a planning department. But that was just a comment. I guess I would have picked that as to oppose this versus infrastructure.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Megan? From the audience? Yes. You have to come up and introduce yourself just for the record, and you may go on from there.
I am Sarah Cheddar, the agent for this.
Sure.
We do have Adam Weaver, Sharon Weaver.
Adam can come up and introduce himself for the record, too. That way, if any questions are,
Perfect. So, and that's kind of why they were all
Adam,
here.
you got to introduce yourself. There's people that don't look, they just hear.
Right,
So,
yeah, so I'm Adam Weaver, Sharon.
all
and I
right.
own-
You're the applicant.
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And the reason that we brought them here today was to answer any of these questions. So the intent for Adam and Sharon Weaver to subdivide this off and build on it is for a mother-in-law suite, but the property that we're going to build, or the structure that we're going to build on it, doesn't meet the criteria for a mother-in-law suite or an ADU because of the size. So the footprint is 1,000 square feet with a 2-car garage, but it does have a basement because they are 2 people, not just one. So that's why we went this direction instead of doing an ADU or instead of doing a mother-in-law suite, because we're trying to do the right thing, trying to be above board. And this is how we addressed, or we're told we had to address it, because of the size of the property, or size of the building that we wanted to build. And Adam can probably speak more on to what's going to happen with the property. Did anybody pass away or it did change hands because he is the individual with the family?
Yeah, and like Sarah said, basically what's going on in this instance here, which I'm not very old, so I mean we're talking for the next hopefully 40 plus years here will be happening, is we just had a baby, which is back there like 4 days ago, and my in-laws are aging, and so we're trying to build a home so our in-laws can live there as they age and we can help take care of them, and in the meantime they can take care of our newborn baby, help us with that there. And we've been working with the office here for like 9 months or something, and they've given us many different things that we should do that change every time we go there, sort of. And so we've been 9 months into this process of trying to start to build a home on our land for our aging in-laws to help us care for our new child. And we don't honestly care how that gets done. We don't care if it's on our property or we give them 3 acres or we build a road across our yard from Aeronauts or from Shutterham Drive. We don't care how it has to happen or what rules we want. We just want some clear guidance on what direction they go, and we'll do that. We don't really care if we have to build a paved street from Shutterham Drive to this part of our land, then so be it. But I think that's a little bit silly when you think it's like 200 feet from a paved road to this proposed structure, as far as the road goes. But yeah, I mean, we're not talking a short-term thing. We're talking, 40, 50 years at least. And I think that as Rapid City grows, it's going to make more sense to have another house there.
Well, and in all essence, they didn't want to subdivide it off. They wanted to leave it as 2 properties, but the home that is being built doesn't qualify for those ADU, or even though it's 1,000 square feet, which is, I think, your mother-in-law's suite. But since there's a basement underneath it, even though the footprint is the same, given that there's a basement under it, that's where the issue came into where we had to subdivide.
Right. Yeah, and we were, and part of this process too is we were given advice that, what we were planning was going to work out. And so we went to every person in our neighborhood and talked to them. We went to the water board and talked to them. Everyone was like, yeah, that's great. Good luck with the county. And that was kind of what they said. They were like, we've tried to work with the county. It's a nightmare. And we said, no, the county will be nice. So a little bit of this, we're going upon the advice we were given. And then we turned everything in after like a tremendous amount of effort. And now we're here and they found this road thing. I mean, I don't know that their advice was disingenuous. I just think it wasn't super organized, what they told us to do.
So I guess we're seeking guidance from you as to what your concern was, Chair, as far as it's changing hands, and you're absolutely right. There are half-acre lots up there, and that's why we did go to the neighbors and say, hey, this is the instance. They're not looking at subdividing off 4 half-acre lots to sell them out and do tiny homes and
Right.
and these guys would be willing to sign any documentation that would prevent somebody else from doing that for future, because that's not their intent either.
Right.
But just trying to find a happy medium of getting to a point of where they could build their in-laws a suite so that they could be, because I'm sure if you look, there's no other land there to buy. There isn't. So we've tried to look at land, we've tried to look at the stuff next door that just wouldn't work because it's either got stairs or it wouldn't work for laundry or something like that as they get older. So this was the only medium we could find in the area that was close to them without driving all the way back into town with an infant to drive all the way back out.
Or when they get, 80 years old, that's not ideal either, so. Anyway, so that's where we're at, guys. So sorry that was a lot of maybe backstory you didn't need, but yeah.
Do you have any questions for
Well,
us?
I'd like to have that map. Megan, can you put that map back up of the property, that aerial shot satellite? I'm just curious. I'm a little, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so now, where's the main house on this one?
The main house is 23679, right in the middle of
Okay,
that.
and then where is the one that you want to,
We're subdividing off that corner that like sticks out
Do you have
awkwardly
the
there at the bottom of the lot.
on the upper or the lower?
The lower left-hand corner.
She's got the,
There.
There it is.
Yeah, so, and again, we're happy to sign anything that says it won't, anything you want to be done with it, but.
right, or
like
if
I
it's
said,
easier to come off Stratorum Drive, we were just trying to not.
it would be not ideal because you have 2 roads next to each other, which would be kind of silly, but we're willing to do that if that's what has to happen. Like I said, it's a very short distance to the main Stratorum Drive.
Oh yeah, because you can see the numbers up there. It's 321.24 feet. from strata rim to where the property would start, and the driveway starts about 5 feet inside of that.
Mike, anything else?
Well, so if, for example, we keep this as one and try to work with that, there's no way that because of the basement and all that that's already there, that we can do this?
Well, in talking to the county, because of the square footage, because we had even asked that with Megan, it's actually under 1,000 square feet with a 2-car garage for the footprint. Then the basement obviously would be under that. It's 900 square feet and some change. But they said since it was future use, I said, well, can we build it and just say that it's storage? But since there was a possibility of future use, we were told no.
So a guest house is under 1,000 square feet or a portion of the main house. And it can only be occupied for 180 days per year. An ADU is under 700 square feet, which can be occupied full-time.
Which 700 square feet for 2 people, and I love these guys to death, and they've been married for decades. But
Need some space.
any of you who are married need more than 700 square feet to live in 365 days a year.
Any other questions for Sarah or Adam? I've got a couple,
Okay.
because I don't disagree with denying it, but I disagree with what they came up with. And I think you got to understand from the viewpoint of us and other property owners, yes, you do have a lot of support from your local property owners, and I can understand that. And that probably shows the quality of the folks that we're dealing with more than anything, yourself included in that. But we're called a planning commission because we've got to look down the road.
Yep.
And we have property use questions come up at these meetings all the time. Why did this get done this way? Well, it was done 4 years ago when so-and-so owned it. If you have one person pull out of your list of support, believe me, it changes that picture a lot.
Absolutely.
So, and those folks are ever aging as you folks are, same as I am. My problem is taking off a little piece. How large is the piece that you're taking this out of?
Just about 6 acres. So that was the other issue, is we couldn't subdivide it into 2 threes because we'd still have to go through this entire process.
Right. We'd also be happy to make it a 3-acre lot and a 2.8 acre lot. That would be fine with us as well. That was also, like I said, we're happy to do it any way that it should be done, but we can't spend 6 months trying to do it away like we have this time, and then get to the end of the process and then have come to this point and they say, actually, no, we found another thing. You should have done it this way. Like
There's got to be a compromise somewhere.
Yeah,
We're willing to, they're willing to do, I mean, again, we would have done it 3 and 3, which is what the ordinance says now, but there isn't 3 to be had. It's just shy.
Yeah, but if a 3-acre lot and a 2.8 acre lot will meet everyone's approval and their office is okay with that, then if we can get a waiver that way, then great, we'll do that. That's any way to get it done.
Let me, before Megan answers that, have you looked at the existing zoning and the future, what the comprehensive plan says? Have you folks looked at that?
I've read it,
Why,
yes.
what we see, what we view it
Yes,
by?
yes.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Go ahead, Megan. You were going to answer about if we went a rezone on a different size.
So if you were to rezone it into a 3-acre and a 2.8 acre, you would still have to go through the same process because the 2.8 still doesn't meet the rural residential minimum.
Right, I understand that. I'm guessing if that's more palatable to everyone, so that we know that at the end of the tunnel, there's actually like a finish line, not, you run the race, you get to the end and you start the race over, because we can only do that so many times.
Well, and it costs several $1,000s every time we do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the time.
That I can understand, but what you're suggesting here on making it a different lot size that doesn't necessarily meet
We
the zoning
still won't,
or the comprehensive,
right?
would you have the same neighborhood support?
I wouldn't see why not, because we're just making it one more bigger lot instead of a smaller lot.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brittany.
Sorry. Brittany Mahler, Planning Director. The issue here is that the infrastructure for Aaron Way is not to standard for this. If they were to make it 2.8 acres to go to strata rim and take access off of strata rim, I don't think the same issue would apply. The other problem is it is platted through the Rapid City 3-mile platting jurisdiction. They grant exceptions administratively for road improvements because they don't maintain these roads. They don't take care of these roads. So as far as them granting those exceptions, they have no accountability for it. Where the only accountability that we have for road improvements or getting those done to match the zoning districts that is through the rezone. So that's kind of where staff comes from and the reason for the request. If they were to make it 2.8 acres and it would go all the way to the strata rim and take access off of that, this conversation would be different.
It would be different with me.
So that's,
That, both of those,
Well, and-
what she's explaining is basically what I'm in opposition to on this. Where the spot zoning, we've got a little tiny area. You carry that back over to Strata, that's what where I was headed with all this. Now you've removed her objection from it, and certainly you broke it into smaller. As long as you get the neighbors and they don't line up against you in here, I would say it's a considerable improvement,
So you're saying if we put that as a 3 acre and then ask for their residents to go to a 2.8?
in my mind.
Yeah.
But I don't know the
And-
rest of the committee. You've got, anybody, go ahead and weigh in on this. Any of the commissioners would like to weigh in on this, go right ahead.
And that's.
Kevin, looks like you're,
I don't have anything. I'm just
all right.
thinking
You just,
through.
I could see your
In
gears
thought-
going.
In thought, yeah.
Does everyone, do the commissioners understand what we're talking about? They eliminate at least two oppositions, but the neighbors still have property use. They're in a zoning. You're still going lower than, no, you'd have what'd you say, 2.8 and a 3 something?
A 3,
Three,
so
two.
we're 2.
Yeah, so you only got one lot, but it's close.
Right.
I mean, I'd certainly look at that more strongly than a little 0.73.
For future use, this is much cleaner.
Yeah.
What you're talking about, the 2 lots.
Especially with your neighbors, I would think as properties change hands, this would be a cleaner approach.
And they were indifferent either way, because they knew
Okay.
kind of the theory, and we actually had all walked around and spoken with all the neighbors, so they got to meet us. We brought them the house plans, told them the colors, gave them the maps that you guys had, so they had all of the absolute information that they needed to have.
Okay, and my last thing is you understand without prejudice means you don't have to pay again. Follow me, if you did reapply.
they will have to for advertising and
For the
letters,
advertising,
not the
excuse me.
application.
Yeah, not the application.
And they would have to resend the letters too, and they have to pay
Yes,
for
you'd have
that.
to advertise.
And then the other issue is we'd also have to pay for the resite, which is about another $3,000.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is we'll do whatever with the plan, but if we spend another $3,000 and we come back here and there's a need for some other random item that wasn't brought up during the process, that would, that would to me be pretty unfair to us, right? Because we've already spent $3,000 for this plan, which we had workshopped a little bit with the office upstairs.
Well, and we had asked, would it make a difference if we made it 7.4 or 3 off the bat? And she goes, no, make it the size you want to, because originally we were gonna do it 5, but then we went out there and with the topography, the 7.4, whatever, worked better. But it was hey, you're gonna rezone it anyway, so you may as well go for what you want and then see what happens.
Because we're not a developer, we're like a family trying to make multi-generational life work here a little bit. And so we can't spend $20,000 just to zone a house, that's not reasonable to me.
I understand your unhappiness, so I'm not gonna, let this roll on, but either way, you had a considerable road issue to do with the way that you propose this. That should have crossed your mind. That was some
Well, and it did,
major
but
construction to build to that road spec. That's not a driveway road spec.
No, and it was also then just grant easement to the same
Correct.
lot and say, okay, these guys will sign easement right now for our driveway to go across their access to get to the same lot.
Okay.
So I
But
guess
it still has to be built to a certain standard is what I'm saying, is what you were running into.
the driveway?
The access.
Oh, yeah, and the other option was having a conversation about just them giving a road easement across their property to get to the same lot, to make it a driveway access off strata rim with an easement across their property, driveway easement.
it wouldn't have to be built to
Yeah,
14
what is two
then?
lots?
It would be a way to circumvent the requirements. So they would basically just build.
It'd be able to
Okay.
meet the
Strata rim
requirements.
across.
All
Yeah, so
right.
they would build an easement around here, but it still begs the question of the.
All right, then I'll back up. Well, that's not something we can do in our review of these sort of things.
And that was where to
So,
get guidance from.
I
to
understand
either
what
go
you're saying now.
one way or the other.
Yeah, we don't look at that way. We look at the road standard, or we look at a direct access, as I noted, that I would do if you
That
change the
something
amount
that
of
I would work
acres.
with this office on, as far as one option or the other.
Any other questions for Adam or Sarah? Anybody from the audience? Thank you. That'll give them a second to think about this
you
before
for your
you
time.
sit down. Thank
Yep.
you, sir.
We'll be
Thank you,
here 'cause
Adam.
I think we're the next one too.
Okay. Yes. Would the commission like to propose an action on it?
If we deny without prejudice, of course, it gives them a chance to come back another day.
Yes. However, they did note that they would have to, engineering fees or survey fees.
Yeah.
And they can be considerable on some of these.
Yeah. But what are our options at this point? Outside of that, realistic.
Staff's recommendations, we've got the rezone after this on the same piece of property,
Yeah.
so whatever you do on this is considerably important. Ron? I saw your hand kind
Well,
of
for the reasons that we've discussed already, I'm going to go ahead and recommend denial comprehensive plan amendment CA 23-06 without prejudice, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to deny per staff's recommendation comprehensive plan amendment CA 23-06 per staff, without prejudice per staff's recommendation. The infrastructure in place does not meet the minimum requirements for low density. Discussion from the audience, from the commission.
Mr. Chair, Brittany, could you go through the option briefly again of what they could do? Where we would be on splitting it with the 2.8, what they'd have to go through to that. That's going to be engineering, it's going to be lot size.
They'd have to submit a new meets and bounds description for the area that they're going to rezone, because it'll be different than the original. They would have to submit another plat to the city of Rapid City, because it's platted through the city of Rapid City. The requirements and the subdivision requirements are through the city of Rapid City, but if they grant exceptions, they don't have anything to do with these road improvements out here. So with Aeronaut's Way not being built to a standard, in our opinion, if you allow one small lot like this, it would be conducive of more small lots along a road that isn't built to a standard that meets those zoning requirements. That's where we come from as far as those concerns.
I have a question for Brittany.
Go ahead.
Was the applicant aware of the issue with the road?
I
To
did
begin
not
with?
work with them directly, I apologize.
It was something that I had briefly brought up at the counter when I was talking with Sarah, but we did not go into depth. I just said, it may be an issue that now you have 4 parcels that could be taking access off of Aeronaut's Way versus 3.
Seems unfortunate that we get to this point and all of a sudden it's, oh, the road's not up to standards, when that maybe should have been the primary issue.
I just want to say that is part of the problem with the 3-mile plating jurisdiction, where we have different standards. We have control over the zoning. If they grant exceptions, they don't have to deal with the roads and the zoning, we do. So just
Any other questions for Megan or comments?
Curious about access off Strato Rim
Go ahead, Kevin.
Drive, if it was platted to a 3-acre parcel.
So because that's a road district, I haven't been able to contact the road district. I left a voicemail on their contact. They have not gotten back to me. But I believe just from previous board discussions, it has a lot to do with what the road district would recommend as they maintain their roads.
Adam, you gotta come up and reintroduce yourself for the people that are out there in the ozone layer listening to us.
Adam Weaver, property owner, I guess. I guess when I bring up, in this circumstance, which is maybe not common, the water company and the road district are identical people, right? So they've so like they have the same president, even same officers, I believe. So so the road district is aware of the thing as well. Also, and it's maybe worth noting that Aeronauts Way serves 2 parcels currently and runs through our parcel. So it wouldn't be 4, it would be 3 at the end there. So
So Aeronauts Way is connecting with those 4, and then you splitting off would be 5. That's how we view it, as they could take access.
so so you're saying our parcel would then have access. Would get ran off of Aeronauts Way, and it already has access on Strata Rim, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, that's super likely, I think.
That and Adam, don't go away. A road district is
They're different entities, right?
well, but that's what I was going to say. And one's the true government entity, the other wouldn't be, right?
Right, that's what I was saying. But I was just trying to bring up that their leadership and officers are all the same people. So like the water district, when we went to the water district meeting, it was also the annual road district meeting. It was the same meeting. Yeah, the same. They only have one meeting together.
All I was headed with this is,
Yeah.
in other words, the road district is obligated to, if they have a piece of parcel property, to work out some acceptable deal about it access.
Yes.
That's a lot of difference.
To get a building permit, you would still need an approach permit from the road district.
Water companies are still in the position of denying access to water if the board should so desire. That was all I was headed into with that.
Anyway, thanks.
Just so that that's understood. One's a government entity under the county rule system. Anything else for Megan while we've got her up here? Anybody else like to comment from the audience before we? Any other discussion from the commission? Hearing none. And I'll just make sure before we vote, staff recommends to deny comprehensive plan amendment CA 23-06 without prejudice, and that's what the motion reads. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. On to item number 16.
Agenda item number 16 is rezone RZ 23-09 is to rezone 0.74 acre from rural residential district to low density residential district. Applicant is Adam and Sharon Weaver. Agent is Sarah Cheddar. Same location, 23679 Straddle Rim Drive. Current zoning is rural residential and existing land use is residential. As with the comprehensive plan amendment, this falls under the same situation where the infrastructure is not in place to support low-density residential, and so staff recommends denial without prejudice.
Thank you, Megan. Questions for Megan? Applicant want to come up here again, or?
I don't know if there's any other information that we have.
Sarah, yeah. Sarah,
I
you
am
gotta
Sarah Cheddar. I
yeah,
am the
thank
agent
you.
for the property. I don't know if there's anything else that we haven't brought up at this point in time, but if there is, or if there's another plan, like the other thing is, can you build 2 mother-in-law suites on this property? And then if we did go down to a mother-in-law suite, does it require the same zoning and same infrastructure?
I think Megan or Brittany can tell you that your building options expand somewhat, being a separate property. That would be 2.8, yes. Go ahead, Megan.
I actually don't believe that there would be too much. So are you asking the difference between building a
Just a
guest
regular
house
building.
versus?
No, I was saying if we leave it alone, do we actually have to subdivide anything off, and can we build 2 mother-in-law suites on it or 2 ADUs on it?
No, there's only one ADU per lot.
Okay. And then my other question would be, oh, never mind, you answered that question. So no, I mean, it was just, is there anything else that we're not thinking of that would get us to the same goal without?
Just any normal building permit requirements, you might want to review those so that you don't run into something, but it greatly expands on a 2.8 versus the 0.74.
Okay. And the only other thing that we had run into is, where we started was the county office, and Megan has been fantastic. But that has been part of the issue also is when we walked in, we were originally told that all we would have to do is a half-acre lot because there was association water and septic. So it wasn't until 2 months later we came back to fill out the paperwork, and then we're told, I'm sorry, and there was 3 individuals standing there that opened the book that told me that it was a half acre. So 2 months later, we came back, and then we were told, I'm sorry, we misread it. It actually has to be a 3 acre. So if there's anything, as far as that goes, as far as education or making sure that we're being given the correct information. So that's where a lot of this frustration is coming from, is going to the source to get the information to do it the right way, and then not getting the information necessary that put us 2 months behind where we are right now.
You certainly would want to go back to your road district and let them know about that you're going to be talking on a full or complete access with them.
Yep. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Chair to address the motion.
Just one more question, Mr. Chair. Is
Sure, go
in
right
1,000
ahead.
square foot, the footprint, and that's part of our issue, that because it has a basement underneath it? So
Yeah.
what's a variance option on that? Is there anything?
For guest houses.
For an ADU, you mean, for the 700 square feet? So an ADU is only 700 square feet of living area, so a variance wouldn't be applicable because it's not a siding or a topographical. Typically, we wouldn't be able to even take in a variance application unless it has to do with siding or topography. It's similar to the variance application requests we get for vacation home rentals for less than 1 acre. That 700 square feet for the ADU is pretty standard. The 1,000 square feet has to do with a guest house, but a guest house can't be occupied more than 180 days out of the year.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
was a multifamily, how would that affect the zoning if they were to put an addition on the house that would house the in-laws? Was the size appropriate, but it would be a multifamily dwelling at that point?
That would be a conditional use permit for a multifamily dwelling.
And would that still affect the road to be County 14 standard?
We would still, ask for comments from Straddle Rim Drive, but if it is using, and it would more than likely be using the same access, no, the road district or Aeronauts Way road condition would not come into play.
Kevin, my question for you, are your questions related to a 0.74 or are they related to the other conversation we had on the previous agenda? I guess that's where I'm lost a little bit and I'm trying to apply where you're coming from.
If we're denying without prejudice these rezones and things, is there another option for the family to look at, is what I'm thinking. I'm trying to find a solution for the family that's not jumping through a whole bunch of hoops. If they did a multifamily, is that easier than trying to rezone and split off separate lots?
But in either case, What I'm saying is then they don't need the 7.74 if you're talking other options.
Correct, yeah, they
We're
wouldn't have to,
dealing-
they wouldn't have to divide their property at
Trying to
all.
get it, that's where I was headed. I was trying to get it back to the one, they either need a rezone for .74 or they don't. And the other options all apply to outside the 7.4, so. That, I just wanted to understand where your questions were.
Yeah, and that's also the question I asked about the road, because now you've got two residences in a single building. So is that is that still needing the road improvement that is holding up this division right now per staff's recommendation? Not just ours, but staff. So just trying to think a little bit outside of what we see in front of
Well,
us
I think the
here.
applicant had helped me about the access to, there was other options that were available to them that aren't available to us.
I agree.
understand that.
And I don't agree with a quarter acre or 3/4 acre lot in this division. I'm agreeing with deny without prejudice so that they could either split the lots into a larger size or come up with another alternative.
To use their whole lot.
Yep.
Brian, you had your finger up for a
I'm
moment?
good.
I would agree with Kevin, too, that looking at some other option there, I don't necessarily agree with the .73. That's different zoning again than everything else in that area, but figuring out some way that, whether it is multifamily or something that can be put into place to allow this housing unit or this place for the mother-in-law.
So if I'm assuming right, so that everybody understands that's hearing this, you're talking about doing a little brainstorming with the planner, the applicants and the planner do a little brainstorming through the ordinance options they have available, one, to use their whole property or subdivide it in.
Exactly.
Either way.
Exactly.
Thank you. Any other discussion from the audience? From the commission? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. I know, I got stopped, right, when Kevin wanted to say something.
We don't
You're
have a
correct.
motion.
We're gonna go back. We've got to make a motion first. I was gonna make it, Kevin, I apologize. Go ahead, and anybody like to make a motion per
Mr. Chair,
staff's recommendation?
I'll move to deny without prejudice RZ 23-09 per staff's recommendation.
Second.
Moved and seconded per staff's recommendation to deny rezone RZ 23-09 without prejudice. Now we're to the point of discussion from the audience, from the commission.
Mr. Chair, I would just encourage staff to work with these folks so they can achieve what they're trying to do. Just probably a little bit, for me, just that .74 just wasn't large enough to agree with.
Okay.
But I think we should be working with these folks to get that mother-in-law in place.
Additional discussion. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Jerry, for correcting me. On to item number 17, I believe.
Megan
Got you
Talmadge.
again, Megan. You're just the whole show today. Thank you.
There's a lot of writing this week. Megan Talmadge, planner. Agenda item number 17 is Major Planned Unit Development Amendment PU 23-07, and it is to amend an existing planned unit development to allow an additional recreational site on the subject property. The location is 12720 South Highway 16. Lot size is 4.82 acres, and the current zoning is Planned Unit Development District. Their existing land use is campground, and they have 100-year floodplain on the property. This item was last heard on June 26th and was continued because we did not have the requirements needed from South Dakota Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources. We have received that letter now, and the changes that staff is recommending to the PUD includes removing the fourplex and campsite, as currently where the fourplex was planned to be, there is now a garage and laundry facility. and the campsites were not constructed, and would put the usage of the septic system over the maximum with the new RV. So staff recommends approval of PU 23-07 with 25 conditions.
Questions for Megan?
I have one. So you're going to add a campsite.
Yep.
Where is that in relationship to the flood map?
So on the screen, I have it in color. The shaded in area is the floodplain.
Right.
And the campsite is right on the edge of that there.
Okay. Right.
Just for the record, you clarified my problem with, on the site plan, I don't find the septic system. And I was aware where the old septic system would be, but first I got to comment and say whoever been the 3-4 different operators we've had done a wonderful job. This place used to be an eyesore along the road. And they've just done a wonderful job of doing, and they run a very clean, nice operation if you go by. It's worth seeing. But I did have concerns because I believe the additional RV spot happens to rest right over where that old original septic system was, which I believe has been now abandoned.
Yes,
According to,
that septic system has been abandoned, decommissioned, however you want to phrase it.
yeah, because we don't get paperwork that says it's literally been dug out or anything, but
Yeah.
I believe that this operator's been a good operator and they have a new system that's acceptable. So I have no complaint on it. Thank you. Anyone here that's here to speak for or against it would like to do it right now? Chair to address the motion.
Mr. Chair, move to approve major plan unit development amendment PU 23-07 with 25 conditions pursuant to staff's recommendations.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded to approve conditional planned unit development amendment PU 23-07 with 25 conditions per staff's recommendation. Discussion from the audience.
I have a question.
Go right ahead.
Do they have any outdoor fire pits at this location? And would this affect, these new dwellings or the new conditions? Would they add fire pit?
The applicant isn't here to answer that question. I'm actually not sure of that. Just from looking at this picture, it looks like there are grill type structures at the campsites. The new campsite is specifically for a working man, so someone that they hire to help with the campground. I'm not sure of what, I don't believe that it has the same facilities that the rented out campsites have.
Yeah, condition number 1 states that there's a fireplace. So I'm just trying to figure out if that's inside the unit or outside the unit.
It may be in the bar area, like the pavilion that they have, just kind of a open area to keep warm in the colder.
And the only reason I talk about that is I'd like the additional conditions, the 2 conditions
Yes.
in here if they are having outside fire to protect that area. It's the only reason I bring it up.
But certainly. And reserve for more comment. The only question I would have on that is whether it meets our obligations to them having a campground in their PU. In other words, I don't think we have any restrictions on them having a grill in a campground. We do on presently in our vacation rounds, I believe there's reference to it, but I don't think there's anything in a campground right now. So they could use the grill, and I think their grills are set up for charcoal. That's what it looks like, Megan, to you too?
Yeah.
Do they still have to comply with any of the fire regulations that are in effect at the time? Like if the Black Hills Fire is regulated, they can't use any of the outdoor
I honestly
briquettes.
don't know what it comes to on charcoal.
'Cause
I don't
they say
know.
they can't use any kind of outdoor briquettes or anything like
Yeah.
that in the Black Hills Fire District.
I know that at least the new one where we refer to gas meets it, but I don't know about charcoal. Haven't got it. We could, you certainly could address that and the staff could make their, we could leave that so that the staff addresses it before the paperwork's handed out. We've done that before so that we know that we're in compliance with what should be done. But I do know that we don't restrict, and under a PUC, that's what they would have gone by, our old guidelines for RV park, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I'm
And
gonna
we didn't
email Jerome
restrict
right
a
now.
charcoal grill.
Yeah, I'm emailing Jerome right now to find out.
Okay, you're gonna find out?
Mhm.
All right.
And this item is still going to Board of Commissioners on the, well, what day is it? Is it the 1st, August 1st? So, because it's a major plan unit development, it has to go to both. So I'm not sure if a recommendation to the board to have those fire conditions in would be appropriate.
We could amend such that it has reviewed for open flame. That's basically what you're saying. That's the requirement of open flame.
Yeah, that's my concern. So do we just recommend that we add the 2 conditions for
Mhm.
open flame?
Yeah.
That
Yep.
would be my recommendation.
Okay. Would you take, would the maker and the second accept that amendment?
Would we put in there must comply with local regulations, something to that effect? And then we
Our
could-
two condition rule for open flame fire.
Yeah.
We just add that as conditions. That way, if they have it,
So you'd be dealing with 27 conditions instead of 25 is what he's recommending. That's probably a simple way to do it, and then if they don't have open fire, we don't have to worry.
Right.
Discussion on that. What Kevin's proposing is that it would be 27 conditions. We add our 2 open flame conditions to the 25 conditions that exist. If they don't intend to use an open flame, it's not a problem for them. If they do, they would have to notify the people as they pull in that they have to know what the fire conditions are at the time they're using the open flame. Discussion.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So the next one that comes up that deals with a campground, will we impose those kinds of limitations? I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't, but
Yeah.
we're sort of legislating here.
Now, this is somewhat of a precedent because we've never done it on a campground.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Jim. It's a good thing to discuss.
It seems to me that's up to county board to decide. Maybe not us. Even though I think it's a good idea to, of course, would seem sensible, but.
Megan?
Speaking of modifying the code, basically, it'd be
Yeah,
the easiest
right.
way to do that.
Megan, open flame's becoming more and more of a topic in discussion on these things, even for housing, everything. Is that something then maybe we should be saying back to them after we certainly have the right to put these 2 conditions in this one, but maybe, I understand where you're coming from, Jim. If we do that, then perhaps in our time after reviewing, we should make a recommendation to planning to start looking at open flame items that relate to other things than vacation home rentals. Is that what you're saying?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
being the owner or part owner of a campground, open
Right.
fires are pretty common. As long as they follow the recommendations put forth by the state or perhaps Jerome. I've appraised this property a couple times, and I don't think they have open fires. I think what you're looking at is just those barbecue grills, which predominantly just briquettes. But I think we really need to be looking hard when we recommend no open flames for a campground, because if you go to all the other campgrounds in there, such as Crooked Creek Campground, and I believe Aaron Olson, he just developed that campground across from the sawmill. Do those have fire pits?
I'm not aware, but I'm looking in our section of our ordinance under recreational vehicle parks, and it doesn't address any kind of open pit or prohibiting them or limiting them at all in that
Yeah.
section.
Can I make a recommendation? We're beginning to get off the subject. Point of order wise, Kevin's two conditions are within understanding. They are direct open flame, they either exist or they don't exist. And his question was whether charcoal comes under the light of open flame. So point of order wise, I would make a recommendation that we approve those two conditions. As far as the additional coverage we're doing by that on open flame, I think is a different topic. So, and I think her stating that RV parks, all Kevin's comment is in regard to the charcoal that's already set up to have there. So I guess I would like to limit it to that, and that's your only concern was the charcoal in your,
Yes, my concern is that our surrounding areas catch on fire from
Oh, yeah.
unattended flame. And if our conditions follow the rules of an approval by the jurisdictions controlling fire, then I see that that's not a bad thing to add here. I'm not sure that it directly applies to the two items that they're asking for in this conditional use.
but they do fit what Ron was saying. They would have to meet the permit requirements for doing the proper use of the open flame. That's why I say point of order wise, I don't have a problem with him asking. So,
And half the
I would-
enjoyment of camping is sitting around a campfire
just
making
because we've got a
s'mores.
little opposing here, I'm going to ask then that you make it as a separate motion to include 27 conditions, and then we can vote on that, and we'll vote on the other if that doesn't fly. This is because I see a little bit of a spread here, and there's no use complicating their request by that. So could you please make that, yeah, can we do that?
Yes, sorry, Chairman, I just wanted to be able to answer Commissioner Ross Connect's question. I did look up, and they do have fire pits in that new campground. That was one of the newest ones. Mhm.
So I would say that we follow what we did with that particular campground.
Okay. So then you would be opposed to changing your motion,
Well, if it's needed,
amending
I
your
would
motion.
agree, but I think we're being too restrictive. As far as I'm concerned, they could, I don't know that that campground has open flames, but if they wish to have open flames, if they thought that was something they needed to bring campers in, then so be it. If Jerome issues a proclamation saying that, there's no open flames allowed, and there are certain times where it gets real dry, then every campground in the Black Hills has to follow that.
Okay, at this point in time, we have a motion on the floor, it's been amended.
I haven't
And in
officially
discussion.
I've asked
Correct.
questions and
Correct.
asked if we could do that. I haven't officially amended an approval. So I'm just going to leave it as questions. I'm not going to make an alternate motion at this point.
Okay,
I would like to review those two conditions in further detail to see exactly what they do say so that I'm a little bit more aware of exactly the wordage in there.
this particular one is based on a 2-year review right now.
Yeah.
You could request that that be reviewed in 1 year if you so desire.
No, it's okay the way it is.
Okay,
And like I say, I don't think it's directly affecting the units that they're asking for this development. So it's not, I'm bringing up something that we may want to think about in the future, but I don't think it's directly affected by what they're asking to do here. So I don't want to put additional burden on them for something that's not directly relating to the buildings that they're building.
one of the things that's different versus a vacational rental, somebody's on site managing this. So it is a different situation than the vacation home rentals and other uses of it. So I just want to point that out to the commission.
And there's greater concentration, in a campground, there's lots of people around, those kinds of things. I think there's a sense of inherent safety in numbers. Some people will notice those things, but still, the idea of open flame is sometimes very difficult to justify, I think. But
But
support.
I do agree with your question. I'd like to know whether charcoal fits under open flame. I think it does. Doesn't it, Brittany? We should get an answer on that, whether
Yeah, and
charcoal
I did
fits
send
as
a
open flame.
message.
That's a good question, Kevin. Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? The motion is to approve per staff's recommendation, PU 23-07 with 25 conditions. From the audience, from the commission. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. On to 18.
Right. Item 18 is ordinance amendment OA 23-01 to amend section 319 vacation home rental of the Pennington County zoning ordinance. The Board of Commissioners did send this back to the committee. So the committee made their recommendations, and you will see that they've made some different recommendations, and those based on the review of the short-term rental associations suggestions. So these are in your packet. So I know Charlie was at both of those meetings that they had reviewing that. So there isn't too many significant changes.
But those modifications have been done. In fact, I'm only aware of one modification that's incorrect in what's in your packet right now, and that's in regard to the local contact. We had, through our memo, which we'll talk about here in just a second, acted upon local contact, and we had already transferred the writing that was in the original one that we're replacing. Correct?
Yes. So the items that the committee came back and changed are the items here in the green that you can see in your packet, so.
All right, now, the first thing the chair needs is we do need to complete our memo, which is on the table right now. For those of you that don't have a copy, I'm just going to quickly, because it's been a number of weeks. We started out with the 7 items. The first item was 1 acre lot size. That's been handled. Parking has been handled. That was item number 2. Transfer has been handled by the Planning Commission. That's number 3. Local contact, as I just noted, we did make a recommendation to a change from the committees. Number 5, density, we have not addressed. We jumped over and did number 6, moratorium, where that was denied. And that leaves numbers 7 also unaddressed. So we have 5, density, number 7, other items. We do need a motion to bring that memo off the table so that we can complete the items on that and then move on to the ordinance amendment OA 23-01. So you want to make a motion?
So moved to take it off the table.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to take memo dated April 24th. And when I said it's been a number of weeks, it has, 2023, off the table. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. If we were to follow the numbering system, number 5 would be next, density. We are on the topic of density as a planning commission. And certainly, anybody in the audience has the right to request to speak on it as well, but we are discussing it for the commission's review. Anybody want to jump in there and be first? Go ahead, Kevin. You're a brave soul.
Well, I'll just reiterate what I have stated before, and that a 5% density cap per the county doesn't look at zone, an area, a neighborhood, a community. And I've got real concerns where you can have 40, 50, 60% of a community area that is vacation home rentals and not residential. So that's my main concern with a density cap of just leaving it as a blank 5%. I think we need to have some discussion around what we may be able to add in there to sort of focus more on some of those communities that they don't become big vacation home rental areas. Then the other side of me says, well, if the whole neighborhood wants that to be a vacation home rental community and there is no residences there, is that a terrible thing and are we over-regulating that? So those are just some of my thoughts. I'd like, all of your guys' input and thoughts along those lines as well. But it just seems like if there's a lot of people that live in a area and a vacation home rental moves in and they don't like that neighborhood, they move out. One of the existing residences, they move and somebody buys that house for a vacation home rental. And all of a sudden that starts ruining the quality of life for the people that are living there. Another person decides they don't like it, they're moving, and another vacation home rental moves in. Is that a domino effect that's happening? I'm just trying to think of a really good balance for how to keep quality of life for existing residences, but still allow vacation home rentals. And I think the way to do that is through the density, kind of limiting it per area unless we do a variance in that ordinance so that if a neighborhood wants more vacation home rentals, a higher density, then we could allow that. What I'm not really finding clear as to how many houses per square mile or, how to define what a community is, how to define what an area is, because they overlap, they cross paths. It's not an easy thing. And I've dwelled on this for a long time and I haven't found the right combination or mix of answers, but which is why I'm turning to the intelligence of you guys to see
Mr. Chair.
if we can't come
Go right
to.
ahead, Ron.
I look at it subdivision. Subdivisions are created, and probably the majority of subdivisions that you see in the county, they go back 20, 30 years when we didn't really have vacation home rental problem. But if in some subdivisions have, 20 lots, some have 10, some have 100. If there's a mechanism in there saying no more than 25% of a subdivision could be vacation home rentals, at least that would address the subdivision that's 10 acres and address the subdivision that's 100 acres, just a percent. Now, I'm not saying that's the answer. I'm just saying that's kind of where my thinking is. I certainly don't think you should have a subdivision that's 50, that was created as 50 single-family residents, and then allow 60% of that subdivision to be vacation home rentals. To me, that you're totally changing the dynamics of the original owners that still have single-family residents. I think that jeopardizes their situation.
The density thing is a can of worms, any way you look at it. What Ron's talking about, I understand, and we live in a small development out by Hill City. So if we were to set that up 5% or whatever it is, what about down the road that's not part of the subdivision? So how are we going to say, well, okay, we're going to do this, but what are we going to do about these guys down here? It needs to be something, but honestly, I'm like Kevin, I have absolutely no idea how you're going to be fair about this thing and not get somebody screwed in the process. I don't know.
Charlie?
Go right ahead.
The first thing that came to my mind when we talk about density is Idlewice Mountain. I mean, that whole subdivision
Can be.
is mostly VHR, so.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So Ted Venters did Idlewice Mountain back in the early 70s with the sole intention, vacation home rentals or nightly rentals, and I've stayed in some myself. So the idea was when you buy into this, this is what you're buying into. Not that they can't use them for single-family residence, but you can buy into it. Then there's another subdivision over by Three Forks that I've done some appraisal work, and Rob Livingston developed that. And people know when going into it that it was planned for nightly rentals or single-family residence. And I'd like to see in the future where a subdivision was created solely for vacation home rentals or a combination thereof, so everybody knows up front what they're getting into. It's these old established neighborhoods where somebody comes in and that, and as I said, the most valuable asset a lot of people have is their residence. And when that dynamic starts changing, being in District 1, I don't know how many fires I've tried to put out. I just wish there was a stronger mechanism that we could control some of this.
I'll weigh in a little bit.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Brittany, didn't you say that our percentage that you know of vacation home rentals is small? It's like less than 2%, just kind of a guesstimation.
A guesstimation. I think some of the data that we have includes some of the incorporated cities, so it kind of skews that information. Charlie and I actually discussed this morning. We think that there's probably around 300, maybe 400
400
in the county. And we have about 26,000 housing units, single-family housing units in the county. I mean, rough guesstimate here, just kind of off the fly from what I remember. So we're in that 2 to 3% right now, is what I'm guessing.
Not including the 14-day item.
Right, not including the ones that do like the rally, quote-unquote rally rule type, but the actual ones that are up on VRBO that are renting on a regular basis.
Okay, thanks.
Excuse me.
Go
Does
ahead.
that include people who operate without any permit to do so?
That our estimate.
You've
We have
looked
between, 70 to 80 ones that are actually permitted. So
And
have
what?
quite a few that are not.
Yeah, a couple hundred or
Yeah.
more, yeah.
I'll
Mr.
just
Chair.
weigh in and give you some of the background of the committee if you'd like, so that it's more open.
Okay.
The committee reviewed this item no less than half of the meetings they met, and they met a number of weeks in a row. I've got all the minutes, all the listings. We had a lot of public, I wouldn't say a lot, but a good number of public at those meetings as well. In that review, their limited conversation is how do you control? One, you have the 14-day, which the state, and I'm going to venture out and say, because I'm really in support of this, and I think the state needs to get out of the 14-day business. And that may be a handful to get done, but it needs to. It's gone by its wayside now. They don't collect taxes. There's all sorts of reasons for incorporated areas. People either want to regulate them or they don't want to regulate them. It's time for the state to get out of this thing. Well, no matter what you do, they can do it for 14 days. We came up in our discussions that approximately there's somewhere between 1,000 and 1,100 total vacation home rentals at any one time without the 14 days operating or going on within Pennington County. That includes incorporated and non-incorporated areas. Assuming that in the incorporated areas, and there's some people who take exception to this, that 600 of them, 500 to 600 of them are in the incorporated areas that we don't control. That's where Brittany and I came up with the remainder would be in the non-incorporated areas of Pennington County. There's a lot of problems. There's legality problems in what you can do. And they had legal advice through all their meetings, other than one or two the legal didn't attend. And density was one of the things that had a number of, answer back. You have to watch what you do when it involves property rights. And that being that you can't go around and just ask neighbors, okay, all the neighbors oppose it and this one wants it, you're going to lose. in court. That's been decided years ago. Another thing is we could figure other ways of coming up with our density. And the committee reviewed a couple of those options, and one of them was excellent. The problem with it, we'd have to raise the taxes to buy a whole new program for the county to put the app on we needed from the company to show what on a monthly basis. It was actually daily. You could almost pin it down to daily what the density of different housing uses were. Well, heavens, let's talk about reality. The committee did, and the committee came up and said, "Hey, just be realistic. They're not going to buy a whole new computer app or a whole new computer system for the county and then buy an app that we have to continually pay for." So that got kicked out. On the other hand, of that very same thinking, the committee reviewed, you can't turn these things into a liquor license. You can't turn it into specialty where the one house that's got it turns around and makes it such that that house can, whatever the market will bear is what it comes down to. So there's where you're at, and that's the difficulty. Where do we land in there to get it done right? If you wanted to go by numbers, and it was pretty close to what the committee came up with, and a couple of people on the committee, one was an operator, and Laura was with the, what's the organization? Elevate. Laura was with Elevate. There was two people had very excellent numbers on a monthly basis from their tracking. One was an operator, and the other one was Laura from Elevate. So we did have some idea, and they were usually in the 1,000 to 1,100 category without rally week, which I say again, here's the 14-day rule. During or before rally week, you might find 14 or 1,500 places. And I believe that's what Laura said one time. She found almost 1,500, I think. So that's what you're dealing with. I've sat through it. It's been 2 or 3 years. It's difficulty. I have to tell you, the committee did an excellent job. I think they've got me convinced. I think what they wrote up was a workable thing. It is available to us and without cost. It's not as quick. It's not as pinned down tight. It's legal. We're not discriminating against someone. We're basing upon housing numbers that come and are available to the whole general public. But
Mr.
that's
Chair.
my feeling. Go ahead.
And how are we going to address then when we get to some community that says we're at the 5%? And we're gonna tell everybody after that, so sorry. Times change. Different communities are meant for vacation home rentals. Edelweiss is one of them, but there are other subdivisions out there that.
That's a real good point, and they discussed that. One of the things about that is that if they get to that level, then it's going to automatically trigger more discussion from Planning Commission, Board of Commissioners, the public, operators, those that oppose it. However, at least it's a guideline to know what's happening. And the courts, in a way, have tied our hands. The courts say that vacation home rental is a residential use. And we, as a planning commission, we can't go against it. So the property owners do have rights. They've got covenants, but the covenants that are in existence now, like Ron talked about from years ago, they didn't. They said commercial, no commercial.
Yeah.
That's how it was written in there. There's tons of covenants out there that say commercial, but don't address a vacation home rental or a bed and breakfast, this sort of thing. I think those are going to either have to be upgraded if you oppose this sort of thing in a strong enough context. You're going to have to go spend a few dollars and get your covenant straightened out, and it'll take you 6 months to a year to get it done. But covenants are still available to property owners to go farther than we go. It's not available to us.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So one of those, a good example was about 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, Remington Ranch Estates up there. And one of the families, they had an attorney in the family, a business in Sioux Falls, a law firm. And I watched what they did. they didn't want a vacation home rental in that subdivision because it specifically said commercial. That didn't apply. So it was approved, but then they did change the covenants, and I can't remember so many, a percent of the landowners had to approve the change of their covenants. But it wasn't any lengthy language. It was just pretty simple. No nightly rentals, and that was it. And that was added
That
to,
kills the 14 days,
that was
that
added to
kills
their,
our ordinance, that
Yep.
kills everything. That's correct. If you want to pursue it in court against the person.
right.
Dessel, please introduce yourself for the record.
Dessel Peterson, I was one of the members of the committee, and I was in the minority on the committee because I consider myself a representative of neighborhood interests. And the committee had more people who were in favor of vacation home rentals.
Dessel, can I stop you? Do you remember the vote on density?
Yes, I do.
Yes. Would you go ahead and tell the commission that?
In terms of,
Oh, the final vote, what was the number? Wasn't it 4-2? There was only 6 that.
I think that's correct, it's 4-2.
Thank you.
But I wanted to address the different issues than just the overall, because what I am concerned about is the situation that happened in our neighborhood where there were 2 vacation home rentals that came in on either side of somebody who had their own home. And all of a sudden, he's surrounded on 2 sides by a vacation home rental. It's not under his control, but it had a significant impact on his use of his own property. So what I suggested to the committee was that there be a distance requirement, that you could not have them any closer than 250 feet, 1 per every 250 feet. The response I got from the committee was, well, then the neighbors should use covenants, as Charlie is suggesting. You should use covenants to deal with the neighborhood issue. The problem with that is that, as I understand it, it takes unanimous approval to get covenants. I don't think you can just do it by majority, and that's something I guess I'd like a legal response to. But that was my understanding, is that it has to be approved by all of the property owners. And in that situation, it's a non-starter because you've already got somebody there who has a vacation home rental. So you're not going to get people to agree, even when 95 or 90% of the people don't want them in their neighborhood. So I would like you to consider a distance kind of thing that says not only 1 per 250 feet. If something like that would get at the idea of the concentration of them. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
That's one of the reasons
Go ahead.
that
Questions for
the people talked about 1 acre, give the distance. And of course, if it's sitting on the side of the 1 acre, it's not really going to do that. But I do have a question, because you're familiar with this sort of thing. What do other jurisdictions do on the density cap? Have you run into that? Did you look at that?
And I'm trying to remember now, the research that I did, there were some entities that did a percentage that we've talked about, a percentage of, you can't have more than a certain number of a percent within it. But then I think there were a couple who did the distance in addition. So they had 2. They had a percent for the particular area, and then they also had a distance requirement. But that was in the minority of the other agencies that I looked at when I was reviewing it. There was only a couple, maybe 1 or 2 who had done that distance thing. So it's not as common.
I could see, like Silver City, with the different ones they have there with the distance requirements. I mean,
Right, but then they're non-conforming uses. You see, they already pre-exist. So pre-existing non-conforming uses can continue. So that doesn't affect what's there already.
No.
This is looking towards the future. Thank you, I appreciate your time.
That's what I've got one for you. And I'd be one to join it too. I believe you and I both brought this up. We didn't know what percentage it took to alter or amend a covenant. We heard 75, we heard 100. The legal wasn't there then. I guess I'd like to see our legal at least do a little research and come up with that answer before we get into passing this forward to and I'm sure the commissioners would like to know too, the Board of Commissioners.
Right, I don't know what the
Because if
rule is.
covenants is a viable opportunity, it'd be nice to know. If it's not, then it's nice to know too.
Yes, I agree.
So I guess from the Planning Commission, I'm listening here and I'm going to ask the Director Brittany to do a little research through their legal avenues, which are here. What percentage it takes to amend covenants. And then I guess I'm going to throw in, how long would it take? You know, what's the legal process? A realistic picture, is it 90 days? Is it 6 months? Is it a year? What does it take to get those done? And some of it's certainly based upon the reaction of the property owners. But it'll give us some idea what we're looking at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Charlie?
Yes.
Our development is trying to amend covenants right now and having a real hard time because we have about 110 houses out in Black Gap, and I think our threshold is 80%, and I don't know if it's written in the document or if it's state law, but that's one thing we want to lower a little bit, so.
I'm involved in one too with only 13, and we're concerned because if it's 100, and we had the same question at our most recent meeting, if it's 100, then obviously if only 12 agree with what they're going to do, we're dead.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't most covenants have a section how to amend? See, ours does. Ours, how to amend.
You can't believe how their property covenants, many of them don't have a housing homeowners association attached to them because they've incorporated more money in bylaws. A lot of them don't have renewal requirements. A lot of them don't have definitions with them. So they're all over the board, but they're still legal until they're proven or it's in a civil court. It's a different deal. But I agree with you, and they're even worried that one person in ours, because it doesn't name how to amend out of the 13, and you can't even get them continued. So it is a difficult question. It's an excellent one, Dessel. I think we probably should pursue that before we make our final recommendation on the, it'd be nice to know. Go ahead.
We don't look at covenants anyway, do we?
No.
I mean, even if they have the right language, that no vacation home rentals are allowed or whatever, we still can't look at that.
Right.
It would be up to the homeowners to go into court, civil court.
The only reason I bring it up is it's one of the options in regards to density that was discussed at that was the only reason, and at least I think we owe it to the homeowners out there that we represent the Planning Commission, that we realize they can do something or they can't do something. We have an idea what they can do or can't do. That's the only reason I bring it up. No, I don't think we can say that one covenant is a good one or one covenant's a bad one.
So even if they come in and say, look, we have this, we've revised our covenants, see? And we'll still have to approve.
Mm-hmm. It's yours to
It's
pursue.
your deal to go to court.
Plus, we have to remember, and I'll just finish my comment and you can go ahead. We have to remember all these still then get X'd out by the 14 days. Just think about that. Unless the covenant was written, you can't have them. You have 14 days, X is out. Go right ahead, Jim. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, Tom Palm. Sorry, I haven't been here for a bit, but it sounds like this thing has been ongoing anyway. Just a couple of comments and a question. As far as when you set a 5% cap, then is there a process for reviewing that? Is it yearly or every 10-year census, or how do you, and I agree, you're probably not going to bump up against that 6% or 5% probably, but if that comes to a point, how do you review that? So is it like suddenly this month we added 3 more homes, so that changes the percentage? You know what I'm saying? Or is it yearly, or how do you track that?
According to the committee and the amended one we have, which would be the committee's comments, the 5% max triggered a review to the 6%, could be nothing beyond that, and there was no definition as to the timetable of review that I'm aware of.
So I guess It's just a question for discussion. And I understand that, I mean, the whole density issue is very complicated. I certainly understand that. It sounds like, if I'm hearing this right, that the committee has come back to you with some recommendations on how to incorporate this density and as outlined in
Yes,
the
it's in,
verbiage here.
it's written into the revised, yes.
It seems like you
Or the
spent a lot of time.
proposed, we've gotten away from calling final drafts, right? And it's the proposed amendment,
Nothing
ordinance
is
amendment.
final, apparently.
Final drafts, what happened was too many copies got out there with final draft on them. And people would say, hey, this was the final draft, and they got it 2 days before another final draft was issued. So we're trying to stay away from that. So this is the proposed, it is included in the one that's in our packet at this time, yes.
So is the intention at this point now for this group to follow the committee's recommendations with your own discussion and with your own input?
That's what we're trying to decide.
Yeah.
That's why this particular topic was pulled out as a separate item.
Okay.
Commissioners have a rather broad viewpoint on this.
I can see that. As far as establishing some sort of distance rules, I think you're going to come up with the same kind of problems that you have with 1 acre rules and other hard and fast sort of definitions of what works and doesn't work. Because for one property, like you say, you could have 10 acres and be 40 feet away from another property. I don't see how you make that work, but that's my opinion. Thanks.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
are we reinventing the wheel? There's got to be hundreds of communities that have the same problem.
Yep.
What are they doing? I don't have time to research it, but I did 4 years ago, and there's all kinds of information, what other communities are doing and what's working for them. So it's like we're starting from scratch right now, and I don't understand it.
I assumed, and remember, you guys put me in there, no vote, and I was to navigate, I believe was the word that I was given, the committee, that I was to help them navigate. And to my knowledge, and we had several that were pretty neutral, we had a couple that opposed things, and we had operators on that committee. And to my knowledge, there was never any from the operators or opposition or anything that could point out anything specific from some other area in regards to density. They did point out at a number of times, many other topics, what was going on, but to my knowledge, not on density. And you sat in all but 2 meetings. And Dessel, you might be able to help here too, please. Do you remember anything that was brought from some other area?
There was a lot of information brought from different
Right.
entities, but all of them have
On
different.
the final vote night, yeah.
They have different uniquenesses about them.
One of them had the expensive one that I said this county would never even look at because I told them then, and you said to help navigate, when we'd have to raise taxes to figure out the density, I can guarantee you density's gonna be too hotbed an issue to even talk about it. Go ahead, Des.
Dessel Peterson again. At the beginning of our consideration, I did do some research on other entities and what regulations they had in fact. And they were particularly from entities where they were tourist locations like us. So there was Lake Tahoe area, for example. In Colorado, the mountains, both of those areas, they do have significant regulations dealing with vacation home rentals. And I can provide that information to you, what I found out at that time. I provided it to the committee. But as I said, what I remember is most of them had a cap on the number. And we chose to go with a percent. Our committee chose to go with a percent rather than an actual number. Some actually did go with percentages. Lake Tahoe had a 10%. Douglas County in Nevada had, let me think, I'm trying to look through my research quickly here. Placer County, Colorado, that's in the Lake Tahoe area, had a maximum of 3,900 short-term rentals. Douglas County had a maximum of 600, so they came up with a number that they decided to go. And I can provide you what I did find, but I'm wondering if there is something through the American Planning Association, which Brittany, I'm assuming, is a member of, if they have some guidance, because that would be helpful for all of us, I think. But I can give this information, what I did do, which was fairly limited research at the time.
I believe the commission would be interested in that.
Yep.
I know the Board of Commissioners are going to be.
I can,
This was discussed, but what I was getting at was each one that was discussed, a limited number, we kicked around those things, and as Dezel pointed out, it didn't necessarily prevail in the final. How many times did we continue this, Dezel? Density 4 or 5
I
times?
don't know, we spent
It
all,
was well over half the meetings.
Uh.
So we took little bits, tried to do it in bits and pieces of the problems
but
of
I did look
establishing.
at those areas, and I'm looking at Las Vegas, Woodstock, New York, 29 Palms, California. They all had regulations, but they all had an absolute number of something. And I called a couple of them and said, "What's the percent?" and didn't get response from the staff. So, but I'm certainly you can have a copy of
Thank you.
all of this information that I looked at the time if it's helpful to you.
One of the topics
Jerry?
that came up that it would, limiting to a set number, did similar to our liquor licenses per population.
Right.
That came up in discussion.
Yeah, and setting a maximum number doesn't really address density,
Right.
because all of those could still be in one subdivision, one area.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
I've spent a little time on the southern coast of Oregon around Lincoln City, and very much a tourist area, of course. And in that county, they have Lincoln City and several other small communities along there. And they seem to have addressed it by a percentage, which when you have a relatively small area, the percentage does to some extent represent density in a clear way. But as soon as the communities, one after another, adopted an ordinance restricting, then everybody fled to the unincorporated portions between the cities. So you had all the vacation home rentals, and they were maxed out in the communities, but there was plenty of room in between, and the fun continued. And so I think that one of the frustrations is that even if we could define subdivisions clearly and in some way equitably, we could maybe impose a density thing. But it's just so scattered, and you've got people with 3-acre lots, and then you've got a small subdivision of half-acre lots or whatever, and it makes it very difficult it's a sort of a mathematical horror, it seems to me, to try to figure this out. So the reality is we should have fairly large number of vacation home rentals. We depend on tourism, and obviously tourists like vacation home rentals. So if anything, we should err in favor of having more rather than fewer. But anyway, I don't see any real clear way, at least at this point, of imposing an equitable standard. So
Mr. Chair,
Go right ahead, Kevin.
I won't support any cap on it because I believe that as soon as you start putting that cap on a subdivision, it'll be a lawsuit that says, you're telling me that I bought this property
And I
here.
interrupt you. That's what I was going to add in before you spoke. The committee did discuss that it probably would be challenged because there's all sorts of challenges in there. How do you come up with it? How do you formulate it? Or how do you apply it? Go right ahead.
Exactly. And in South Dakota, where vacation home rentals are considered residential homes, it's a suit that would be lost. So that's my position on it. We don't have masses right now, and if masses of homes do go into a certain area, it's because that's an area that people want to have a short-term rental, and it works out for, unfortunately, we've talked about this again, that there are going to be some people that just don't like it, but times do change, areas do become different types of communities, and there is a huge market for vacation home rentals.
Anyone else want to weigh in?
Yeah, I would just make the comment that I don't think we have suffered from some of the harms of vacation home rentals in the sense that the housing inventory has shrunk because too much of it is devoted to short-term rentals. If that begins to happen, then we have a different problem beyond our purview, I think. But anyway, that could be a compelling problem that would require us to somehow address this. But I think we're a long, long ways from that, from the sounds of things. And so I think you have to address the problems at the moment, even because we're not going to be able to solve the problems 20 years down the road because we really don't quite know what they're going to be. And so I see the current proposal, more or less, pretty effective and pretty efficient, I think, for dealing with this. So, anyway.
Thank you. Joyce, please. You can sure come forward. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Joyce Shagru, just listening as a member of the public, but having been involved in this for years and years now. I would like to hear you articulate to us why we think that we need a cap on the number of VHRs. Okay, Jim just got to one point, which is the first time I've heard that this morning. Why are we doing this? And I'd like for you to articulate that, because from that, then maybe we can come up with some ideas of how to answer the question. Is it because of the future? And I'm sitting back there thinking of short-term rentals, not just VHRs now. And I hear you talking VHRs out in the woods, but Rapid Valley and its short-term rentals. So is that an issue of why we need a percentage or a finite number or whatever? Is it that 50% of the homes in a neighborhood or a small community are now VHRs? Or like up in Alpine Acres, 3 out of 10 are now investment VHRs, actually, not family vacation homes. Is that too many for a little development of 10? Is 3 too many? Is 5 the right number? Is that an issue at all? So I'm not hearing, I know it's there, I know it's been discussed, I'm sure by the committee, why do we want to do this, or you wouldn't even have had the discussion. But I haven't heard you say why you think or don't think. We all have our opinion. Mine may be different. I come from a different spot, and density makes a difference in how I personally live. How close are they to how I personally live? It doesn't have anything to do with how many in my community are okay. So that's a question that I have is, tell me why this was written here. Why was this written? And are you looking, like Jim says, 20 years in the future, which is a good, planning is not our strong suit as human beings. But we do need to look at what do we think 20 years out, which is, who knows, but we do need to look. So that's my question is, why are we doing this?
Mr. Chair, I think it's called property rights.
Okay, property rights is one.
And I think, so you got two sides, if I can just, if I analyze it very simply. And I think what we're trying to do is that scale of justice, try to find out what is equal for both sides, because there isn't one size that's going to fit all. But I think that's what we're trying to do here today, because in the last 4 or 5 years, the phone calls that I get, and and these are residents that have been there, just about all their life, and they say, "What's happening in my neighborhood?" And I don't know what to say. Well, if you're over an acre, just pretty much we're going to rubber stamp that. I mean, that's kind of the way I look at it. Not always, I know there's some safety mechanisms, but I do think, of all the things that we have to sit there and address, I think density is the one that we have to look at, or some methodology how we're going to do this, because I don't live in a residential neighborhood, but if I did, and the next thing you know, I got 3 neighbors that I used to be able to sit there and go have coffee with, and I knew who was going to be there, and then down the road I had 3 vacation home rentals. That is not what I originally bought into. So to me, we have to sit there and have a formula that controls this to a certain extent.
Ron, that's a good comment, but a really naughty one. I had a former commissioner tell me, and it had to do with vacation home rentals, and it was during the time when there was a lot of turmoil, tell me that if I didn't like what was happening in my neighborhood, I should move. And I said, but I was there first.
Right.
And I've had an investment in a really good piece of property for quite a few years. So now I should move because the climate of my community is changing. It's a knotty problem, and I certainly don't know the answer when it comes to property rights, one against the other. It's difficult, and I appreciate that you're trying to grapple with it.
Weigh in on what you're asking here, and I've never said this in any of the 20 years I've been on this, but one of the things on density that I do understand from what Ron's saying, what you're saying, both the size of it, I believe somewhat on density is because the court ruling was devastating to people with covenants that did not want vacation home rentals. The court ruling ruled that the specific words weren't there. In other words, people felt comfortable that had bought property and had covenants. And then at that time, by the way, some of the covenants were allowed to go out 50 years. They aren't right now, I believe. They're limited to 25, but I can stand corrected if there are people that get them longer. But that was devastating to people that had sat down one-on-one, sat down and said, here, we want these properties not to have these. And I believe density, that's got to be the number one thing comes up. That's the number one thing we as commissioners hear in these meetings is, heavens, I've lived there for 30 years and I thought my covenants had this all covered. Now you're putting it side by side. We had someone today say that they all, side by side, I believe it was Deso, where 2 moved in. We actually just had a recent one where 2, it wasn't quite side by side, it was across the access road, I believe. So they weren't quite side by side, but that's pretty close when right out your access road, and they were all fairly small lots. I think you were here.
Yeah, 3 out of 7, I think.
So that's all I would say we owe it to them to talk about density and what control we really have. Maybe we don't have that control. Go ahead, and if it's in regards to Joyce's question.
So, yes, thank you for asking the question. One of the main reasons I joined the Planning Commission is it is planning. It's forward thinking. It's looking down the road and what's happening now and how can we protect investments down the road. I moved from communities where the planning was not good. It got overcrowded way too fast. The taxes went way up. Local residents couldn't afford it. They ended up with a lot of small, high-density housing around their rural communities. It ruined their quality of life. It drove their taxes way out of the range. It used up natural resources that were in their neighborhood. I think every community needs to have some kind of sustainable growth in order to bring fresh money into an area. But for us, we want to look at how do we preserve the quality of life of all of the people that used to live here and still strike that balance between having that new income generated, those new people moving in, that new growth, but still do it in a reasonable, productive, and logical way that it doesn't overwhelm everybody all at once. The area is not going to stop growing. We have beautiful national landmarks here. We have the beautiful Black Hills. It's going to remain a tourist community. It's going to continue to grow as a tourist community. So how do we find the balance between the people that live here full-time regularly and those coming in for a short-term visit to see our great wonders that we have here? That's why I'm passionate about the density. That's why I'm fully behind people's property rights. But I think with the right controls in place beforehand, people understand before they buy what limitations are. So then they're not coming before us every single time to say, there were no guidance, we're asking for this. If we have some of the guidance in place, then people can understand and know that before they buy anything. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's why I'm looking at density.
And I appreciate the planning and wanting to look ahead. I just saw something. This isn't the only place that's having problems of how overcrowded the national parks and national monuments and all of those are, to the point where it's not enjoyable anymore. Could we have been in front of that more? Yeah, I get what you're saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. Dennis?
Dessel Peterson again. I want to respond to Commissioner Coleman's question. And one of the pieces of information that was not provided to you along with the ordinance was a study that was done by Elevate Rapid City that was looking at housing and particularly workforce housing. And it's showing, that study showed that the rise of vacation home rentals was negatively affecting workforce housing in our area. And that's why I think you got some of the committee members who agreed we really need to do something here with density so that we don't let that number get higher and higher and more adversely impact workforce housing. Does that help answer your question?
I'm vaguely aware of that, yeah. But I don't believe we have a crisis when it comes to workforce housing yet. No, it could happen. And my point is that would temper this whole thing in a hurry if it truly became a crisis. But I think we'll have to see once this government program for the base is finished and that housing is occupied or unoccupied by, the people who are presumably coming in for that, to see how that really affects our housing market. But I would not deny that it is a potential, and that's why I say I don't believe it is critical at the moment, but it could be, and I would not deny that. But
I would ask that staff provide, as part of the record for the commission and for the county commission, that Elevate Rapid City study so that you have that so you can look at it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Brian.
I think we could be here until 5 o'clock talking about density, and we're not going to get anything resolved. So with that being said, I would recommend that staff look at three options. One would be a distance we talked about distance, but distance would be one, a percent of a neighborhood or community. There's a lot of stuff that's got to be figured out. What's a neighborhood? What are the boundaries? But I think a percent distance, and then how many can be adjacent to a single-family residence. So if the neighbor has one adjacent to him, if he's got three that border him, can all three be vacation home rentals, or can one out of the three? I just think we need to look at, I mean, number 7 here is very, very vague, and I just, we really have to dig into this. Staff, I would like to dig into it and address those options that I'd mentioned.
Okay. Before I ask for a second, I just wanted to clarify, maybe then you'll change your wording. When you say distance and the percent to the nearest single family?
Right, let's just say there's a single
Because
family
you did
residence.
adjacent to nearest, adjacent number of them to
The
single
adjacent
family.
percentage and distance would be the three that I think.
Percentage of distance to a single family again? Just a single family, not, I'm trying to pin down what you're telling me.
So if you got a single family residence that is being occupied by single family,
All right.
by a family.
Non-VHR commitments.
So the distance could be from that residence to a vacation home rental, or distance from a vacation home rental to a vacation home rental. There's, that's a.
Yeah. Okay. And then the second one is the total number that can be adjacent besides in
Right.
that same vein of thought.
So if there's a cluster, the way this is subdivided, there's for one property, they're all contiguous. How many, I've run into situations where the guy has 3 neighbors, and he says, he didn't like the first one, then he said, now I got 2 of them, and so can the
Brian,
third.
I wanted to get a second to your motion so that we could discuss it. Is there a second to the motion? I'll second it just to discuss it. Okay, it's on the floor. Go ahead, Ron.
Okay, well, I'm just saying that the way this is written right now, I couldn't accept it. It's just too vague, and it doesn't take in consideration some of the worries that I have relative to the phone calls that I've had over the last 4 or 5 years, specific to vacation home rentals. I mean, to say no more than 6% that's just too vague for me. We're not addressing, to me, the real problem.
Okay. Questions on Ron's motion or discussion?
I just have one.
Go ahead, I've got a couple too.
Commissioner Ross Connect, when we do the research. So do you want the distance from lot line to lot line or dwelling unit to dwelling unit? Because that's very different.
Well, I would leave that up to to staff to figure out what would be
Okay.
most logical, but distance being a formula, looking at distance, however you want to apply that, just so that there's something in there that protects a owner, single family residence.
Okay, thank you.
One of the things the committee brought up on the distance, and that's what I'm talking about now, not the number directly around. If you took a 1 acre lot, let's just not 10 acres or anything, let's say just a 1 acre lot. Theoretically, the property owner of each lot has the right to build their house right with their proper setbacks from on that corner right alongside the other person's and the other rest of their lots available. That itself somewhat defeats what you're trying to do because they have control of that property, the full 1 acre. It was discussed at length that the 1 acre requirement being part of the special use permit versus less than 1 acre becomes part of the conditional use permit if you look at the way the ordinance was written. All those that are less than 1 acre have to be brought before the planning commission. Those that aren't will be administratively controlled if they meet all the other guidelines, voluntarily meet all the other guidelines. And that the 1 acre lot, and that was the vote we were referring to. The 1 acre does provide some buffer. So I have problems with how do you come up with the right way to generate that distance to the single family?
Well, that's why I recommended that staff
Legally.
look at it. That might not work, but right now we don't really have a direction with density. We can, like I said, talk about it at 5 o'clock, and at 5 o'clock, we're not going to be any further than we are now.
Okay. And then the second one is that I do, and it's my same problem. How do you come up with the number of them around that particular same single-family situation. Go ahead, Mike.
I agree with what Ron's trying to do. I go back to the information that she got from these different towns, or whatever, jurisdictions of how they're handling it. I think it would
Exactly.
be good for us to see that. There may be some gems in there that would help. I don't know. I have no idea.
In regards to this particular
That sort of
situation,
thing,
sure.
yeah. Because these other people obviously have gone through the same thing. And trying to reinvent the wheel, if they've got something that works, I don't know.
Any time thoughts on how long you want them to research?
Well, we've already, she has some she said she would share with
Right,
us.
she turned some in.
Yeah. And that would be at least a start.
Okay.
You know, Mr. Chair, so if each one of the planning commissioners got those, then your next planning meeting, you could sit there and say, what's your takeaway? What do you think? But at least now you got some concrete evidence based on what other communities are
You
doing.
took the bait. Shall we put that in there? I'd like to see, because I think we've got to stay on this and pound it out so people that do attend, they see some progress, that we have a sincere effort to make some progress. And I think what you're saying would make some progress. Any other discussion? From the audience? From the commission? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Did you get the 2 steps in that, Gary? Good.
Yeah, and then I'll just confirm the
All
language
right.
with Brittany.
So then we would need a motion to table density until the next meeting.
So move.
Tabling or continuing?
Continue.
Yeah, next meeting is continued. You're correct. Next meeting is continued.
So
Yeah,
move to-
continue.
Chair, I would move to continue density conversation until our next
Is there a
scheduled
second
planning
to
commission
that?
meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded, continue the conversation on item number 5, density, to the next meeting. Discussion from the audience, from the commission. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. On to item number 7, other items. Anybody else got anything else before we talk about the ordinance amendment, I guess they call it an amendment in entirety? I do have one thing as another item. Based upon the motion that's on the floor, I still would feel less than comfortable addressing the ordinance amendment in entirety without the information on density, but that's my own feeling. What does the rest of the commission feel about that?
I'd like to address or have some answers to the emails that we got regarding
Yes.
fees.
Regarding fees?
No.
Sure, that's another thing we may want to have them bring back. Go ahead, Kevin.
That's just my question. Can we go over those fees at a future?
Sure
I
we
have to
can.
leave at 11:30.
Yeah, let's
And
do
just
it.
talk about those.
Brittany, you want to
Brittany's got
put
those handy,
the
or
fees on the table for what they spell out for us? We'd be still under number 7, other items.
All right. So under fees, this is what was proposed by the committee for a conditional use permit. So those are for some of the ones that are under the exception portion of it. It would be $750. The review fee would be $500 and an amendment would be $500. Under the special permitted use application, which is, the internal administrative review, meaning they meet all of the criteria, the application was $500, the review fee was $500, and the amendment was $500. And then the biannual license fee, meaning every 2 years, was $1,000. The penalty fee, the proposed was operating a vacation home rental without an approved conditional use permit or special permitted use would be $1,500 in addition to the double fees that are already allowed under our ordinance. And then failure to license a vacation home rental by March 1st, 1,500. So the license fees were every 2 years. So if you failed to do it by March 1st, it would be the $1,000 plus 1,500, so it'd be 2,500 if you failed to license them. And then if you operated one without an approved permit, it would be $1,500 plus the double fee. So it could be 3,000 if you had to have a conditional use permit, and it would be 2,500 if it was a special permitted use. That's operating without a permit.
Okay, Kevin, before you go on, we do and you should have all received your copies, we do have two internet notifications, email notifications of opposal, one from Sheila R. Watkins and from Dawn Marie Marshall for the record. Just, do you all have those? Thank you. Go ahead, Kevin.
On the biennial review, was that, did you say 1,000 per year?
That's for every 2 years.
Every 2 years,
Every 2
$500
years.
a year? Or,
Yes, essentially.
and that's just to go out and do the review on it. What do we have for every? or
That's
other-
just the license fee. So the idea, my understanding, and I could be wrong, Charlie, just was that the license fee was that they would just basically have to renew their license every 2 years. So that would be part of the review, if they had an amendment, and then just renewing their license to operate, which would require us to review make sure they have their South Dakota Department of Revenue license, that they're getting their inspections from the Department of Health, and they're in good standing.
And then they also would have to be required to use that number, their permit number in their advertising, which would require their fees to be paid up.
And one of the other reasonings for I guess the fees is that the management of the program, because they wanted the committee had recommended that the planning department have a separate web page just for vacation home rentals.
Do we do that for any other operations?
For any other.
Any other?
The only other, well, we do have separate web pages for our stormwater requirements. We do have separate web page for our operating permits for our wastewater. But they wanted a pretty extensive, information for them and links to how to get them, and I think which licenses that were current.
It was pointed out at the committee, one of the operators pointed out that our current fees are less than many of the just one day charges on the vacation home rental, that we almost look ridiculous trying to chase them down.
I just see that, again, these two emails that came in, they aren't the only two that are using it not as a full-time operation. It's a family thing that they're renting out to keep the thing going. And with all the different fees, I can see their position of it makes it tough for them because they're not having vacation rentals in there every day. And I know that it's going to affect a number of family operations that that extra $1,000 a year is going to bite into just paying some of those bills.
The extra 1,000 is every other year, isn't it?
Every other year.
Every other
500 a year.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
I sympathize with Kevin's concern about the two emails, but remember, these are vacation homes these people are renting out. This is not where they live, their primary residence. It's not like they're people who, they have the luxury of having a second home, and I think that's wonderful, and we need to protect that, but it isn't quite the same thing as a primary residence being threatened by too high of fees or taxes or whatever. And I am concerned about the number of people who don't comply, and hundreds of vacation home rentals that operate illegally, basically. And I wish there was some way in which we could bring those people into compliance. And I don't think we're going to see much change here with this ordinance, even with the threat of high penalty fees. It's just not going to happen. I do think we've got to keep one way that encourages good people to comply is that the fees do not seem confiscatory. They seem reasonable. I think these are pretty reasonable for a business, because that's really what we're talking about. These are, whatever the purpose, it is a business. And, but I am frustrated by our inability to get everybody to share the burden here, because they are operating businesses and they're not paying their fair share. So, but I don't know if there's an approach. But I do think these fees seem to me, and very subjective, seem pretty reasonable.
I've got to weigh in here because, again, as your representative, I advise the committee on this. The committee actually would have liked to seen the additional penalties, wasn't it? Applied so that the planning department had that available to do a better job of enforcement. And I recommended to them that that's out of their realm of recommendation. The Board of Commissioners decide those things and where they go through budgets and planning directors do. But that was one of their intents as well, that the planning department needs some additional enforcement, even if it's part-time, to get more people. The committee was very strong about wanting to get the permit situation built up. They didn't want to get the permit too high. They didn't want to get it too low, but they wanted to see people come under the umbrella and get operating that way. So I just wanted to let you know that was what I advised them, that that was out of the realm, or you'd see more on that as well. Anyone else on fees from the audience? We did all the other ones by a motion that were on the memo. Go ahead, Marshall. Would you introduce yourself for the record, please?
Yes, I am Marshall McKaylee. I run Edelweiss Mountain Lodging. I wanted to kind of go over everything entirely, but we'll save that for a different time. We'll just talk about the fees. I think it'd be wise to probably change that for clarification for the 1,000 every 2 years. You know, how most people read it. I guess for myself, I can only speak for myself. Biannually can mean two things: twice yearly, or once every 3 years, or 2 years, however you seem fit there.
Misunderstanding.
Yeah, the misunderstanding on that.
Right.
And I think that's a lot of the rentals that I manage up there. They had questions on that. Also, does this go toward the individuals that already have conditional use permits that are doing things right? Are they going to be feed for doing things properly?
You mean they will suffer the same increase in fees?
Correct. Or is this something for the new
It's an
people coming
overall
on board?
county. The
So this
committee recommended an
supersedes
overall county increase in fees.
in the fees for everybody what about the ones that are grandfathered, or the ones that, I mean, I don't see anything on that situation. That goes back into the entirety of everything, I guess. And I've heard it mentioned many times with Edelweiss Mountain. We do think it's a little bit different up there. That was under the idea of those being vacation rentals when that was developed. We manage all those properties. I work 7 days a week. I'm up there 7 days a week. I'm up on the mountain continuously. We're the ones that enforce the rules and regulations. We have bylaws, we have covenants, and just recently, 2 nights ago, parking situation. And I didn't even get a call on it, but it was something where somebody snuck in extra vehicles, extra trailers. We have designated parking down at our office, and so we had to stop and say, hey, we need you guys to park down here. Now they weren't happy about the situation. I think what they had said is, we've rented many times up by lead. We do whatever we want up there. And I said, this is a different county, and this is an HOA that we abide by the rules up here. Noise complaint. I had a noise complaint at 8 o'clock. Now, that didn't meet the requirements of the association, but we took care of it. Went up, said, hey, understand your surroundings. Sound travels up here. So we try to do above and beyond what we can to keep things organized a little bit better. And I feel bad for Joyce and others that have to go through with individuals that just say, hey, move, or we're going to do what we want here. It's unfortunate to see that. I wish there was more property managers that were working 7 days a week, making sure things were done properly. Then we wouldn't have this ordeal, any of these, to where all these HOAs are restricting and taking care of their own development. But that, again, goes back to the entirety of it. But with the fees, I just wanted some clarification with that, how that was going to run, or if that's pertaining to some of these that are grandfathered in back in the 80s that are still in use as a rental. I think there's just a lot of things I have some questions on, maybe on an individual basis of understanding.
Questions for Marshall?
I would just like to make a comment, excuse me.
Go ahead.
That you're an exact example of what we need for managers on vacation home rentals, short-term rentals. Because 99% of the people that come in short-term rentals are interesting, they're fun to talk to, and they are good tenants for those times. When you have an issue like what you just talked about, and it's taken care of, that's that fraction of a percent that is the problem. That's where I've said from the very beginning, our focus should be more on bad owners. Those are the ones that are creating the problem. Most all of the people are not traveling in from across the country, around the world, to come and make a mess at a place and to create problems. They're there to visit the hills, and I don't know how we address that more, that it's the responsibility of that homeowner or that vacation home renter, if a rental owner, if they do it and they manage it correctly, there are not issues with them. The people, again, other than that fraction of 1%, the people that come in are good, and if you've got a good property manager, there won't be problems, even if there's 50% in a local community, because they're that type of person, most of them.
Yeah, we have real estate commission that we abide by the rules and regulations, and so we're held accountable. We're the ones that are taking on the long days and everything, so I agree. I think, yeah, absolutely, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious about what you meant by grandfathered in.
Well, a lot of these, again, going back to Edelweiss Mountain, that was established, and the idea of any of those, any lots or buildings were made as a vacation home. So they were prior to any rules and regulations, not only in the county, but the state. I just got off the phone with the state. At one time, it was a specialty resort, hotel, changed back and forth from the State Department.
So these homes have never complied with the current ordinance, is that what you're saying? Or they have?
Well, we comply with the current a lot of these ordinance, I mean, again, we kind of go above and beyond some of these, what's stated in here as far as parking and different things like that. But
Right.
with the association up there, a lot of those have been.
I'm thinking about the
rented.
fees. Do the individual homeowners then they operate as individual homeowners of these properties, right? And do they pay these fees?
Do they pay these fees that are?
Annual and for reviews and so forth? Or
They
not?
don't do the reviews, no, they have
Okay.
not, no.
So they don't even pay an initial fee because they are a resort property, is that correct?
So the ones that are grandfathered don't currently have a conditional use permit or an SPU. Under the new ordinance, they would still be required to register and get a license. So they wouldn't be required to go back and get the conditional use permit or the special use permit, because that's the permit to allow them to do it. The license is to verify that all of their state requirements and things like that are being met. So it's two separate things.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So
So
their
the
usage is established, but
Because it's
the
grandfathered.
maintenance of compliance, which is the $500
The
deal every
license
other-
fee
They would
is-
have to go along with that, okay. I see that, yeah.
With all those, the rules, as far as some of the information in here, again, I might be getting off track here. But, we hold the lodging license as far as property managers for some of these properties and the rule, and work with the State Department. And I mean, is that suffice? Is that, when it says in here, each of them have to have their own individual tax license, we carry that license, we carry the lodging license, we carry.
So as far as the licensing, that would all have to be provided, and it does require a review of the on-site wastewater treatment system and things like that for the licensing. So you would still have to license with the county. in addition to that. So all of that information would be submitted as part of the registration and licensing.
And Marcia, just for your note, I noted the same thing. We do allow and have recently allowed as planning commission for the agent to carry the sales tax license.
Okay.
I've been a real supporter that our ordinance says owner. It doesn't say owner or agent, and so and one of the things I'm requesting we put in there would be to add or their designated agent, because that's a proper business term for that. So I agree with you. If that's what you're asking, it does say owner right now, but it needs to be expanded so that it represents what we're in fact doing. So that's, when we get to the ordinance, that's one of the things I was going to recommend we add wording for.
And so it's later, again, kind of going off course here from the fees, so.
But again, I wanted to tell you one thing on fees, and I don't know whether the commission knows it. I've never served on a committee that made recommendation on fees. It used to be the auspices of the Board of Commissioners only. When I first started on Planning Commission years ago, you did not speak about fees. There was 5 commissioners that spoke about fees. So this is, to my knowledge, the first time I've ever seen such an extensive proposal on fees. And I absolutely guarantee you that our elected officials, the Board of Commissioners, are going to be reviewing that very strongly. What's presented here came from the committee, and it's something that we should consider based upon the committee that was out there. That committee works for the Board of Commissioners. That's all I'm going to say. And I did let the committee know that. I've never sat on a committee that ever proposed fees.
Well, I'll be honest, I wish that I could see, I'm passionate about Edelweiss Mountain, and I'm not opposed to the fees. I would like to see it put back into the Edelweiss Mountain community, to be honest. You know, fees like that, going toward, it was recommended up there, taking one of their lots and extending it for parking purposes for the vacation rental for extra units and stuff. So, you know, that's kind of where it's hard to see these fees going. I understand where they're going and the reason behind them, but going toward the community of the HOA, especially one that they want rentals. They have rentals. Everybody that buys a property up there knows that there's rentals. Everybody up there has my number. Some of them have my personal cell. And I'll be honest, I don't manage all the properties up there that are available, but the ones we do, we take care, and beyond that as well. But, you know, something like that, I wish there was a way where we could almost be separated where, you know, I saw on the number 2A, VHRs are used by right for commercial and highway service. If you just put Edelweiss Mountain on there, we'll be a lot easier. Do you see where I'm going? Yeah, I think there are some people that do it right. If I had to have something from Edelweiss Association that says, hey, we have rules that you have to have a property manager. This is the strict rules beyond this. If it would void some of these concerns from other owners up there.
I'd have to tell you, I'd bet $1 to a donut hole that if we didn't run against legality by doing that, I'd be amazed. But it's certainly something, and I, considering what you're saying, the fact that you try to run a program up there and then none of the fees go your direction. You still try to run the good program, but they're all going somewhere else. I understand that as a commissioner. Anyone else for Mark?
Mr. Chair, this is the last topic that I would like to miss on, but I have to leave at 11:30. And
I apologize for getting off track.
No problem. Thank you. And thank you, Marshall. You want to see if we want to put a motion on it before? You can raise your hand or holler. Is anyone else in the audience like to speak on fees? All right. Chair would address a motion.
I'll move approval of those fees.
As recommended by the...
Yeah, and clarification that it's $500 a year rather than $2,000.
Okay,
or
the buy.
$1,000.
Clarification on the biannual.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? Moved and seconded to approve the fees as submitted with a clarification on the use of biannual. in regards to the one fee. Discussion from the audience, from the commission. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Any other items for number 7, other items? Then my recommendation is going to be this. It's getting late. We have completed the memo. We have a number of things that came up today that we requested additional assistance on. I believe it would be inappropriate without that information to start going item by item through the ordinance amendments that's in our packet. You can comment as you see fit.
I agree.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, we can continue ordinance amendment 2301 to the next meeting, certainly, without any additional publication and stuff like that. It's just a continuance.
My only question would be where are we at on that 1 acre requirement? Is that
Part of it.
still stand?
Yes, it is part of it under the, you've got to remember, you're now looking at, commissioners are looking at special use permit, 1 acre fits. Conditional use permit is still allowable under 1 acre per the recommendation at this time.
Okay.
But it has to be reviewed by the planning commission, under 1 acre.
Conditional use permit.
And what criteria will we be able to apply towards denying someone who is under 1 acre? I mean, can we use density, saying this is too close to the neighbor, or, I mean, can that be?
You could reply anything that's under the normal and appropriate conditional use permit review procedures.
The 7,
Go ahead.
if I may, Chairman, the 7 criteria that we always
Oh, yeah,
review
okay.
for a conditional use permit, that would be the criteria that you could use.
Compromising the integrity of the neighborhood or whatever, yeah. Okay, I want to be able to apply that, because I do think the 1 acre is an important factor in reducing density. I mean, I know it's unevenly applied and unfairly applied in some cases, but anyway, thank you.
So Kevin has left, and what I'm trying to say is we do ask these people to keep coming back, but we want to get it right. This has been a long, arduous process, especially for those folks on that committee. That was difficult. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Introduce yourself.
Tom Plum. I feel like I may have been instrumental in changing the direction of the 1 acre. That came up, and I spoke very eloquently, I think, about that. So, I just want to review that, is that my understanding is, and my ask was that there be allowed an avenue through the CU process to be able to apply for a VHR under 1 acre. And I think Brittany has described what those conditions would be. Again, I don't think you're going to open the floodgates to a whole pile. I think you're going to have a few significant people who come forward and say, we've got a different situation here. Can we operate under 1 acre?
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm hoping.
Well, you've already said you only got a couple hundred properties, and how many actually fall under that? I don't think it's going to be a big issue, but I do appreciate you continuing to allow an avenue for people with less than 1 acre. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Any other discussion in regards to the ordinance amendment OA 2301? Chair to address the motion, if we're going to continue it.
I move we continue this item
Second.
to the next meeting.
It's been moved to continue
Yeah.
ordinance amendments OA 23-01 to the meeting. It has to be a specific
August
date.
14th.
August 14th.
August 14th?
Discussion from the audience. From the commission. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, motion carried. One thing I would like to suggest is that we make sure,
Okay.
you guys do a good job of publishing an agenda and everything. So folks that either couldn't be here this time or would want to be here next time, so that they know that it was continued, the item by item review.
Correct, and I do update, there is a sidebar on our front page of our planning page, and I try to update that as quickly as
Thank you.
possible with the new information.
I appreciate it. And we're on to, I got to get the right number here so we can go on. County Board Report 19.
So the Board of Commissioners concurred with the Planning Commission's recommendations from the July 10th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting.
Items from the public. Anybody from the public would like to say thank you? It's not often we have public still here, so I appreciate that. Items from the staff. Items from the membership. Yes.
Where does the bed and breakfast fit in all of this? When are we going to get with that?
That's a whole different section.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that is a separate section of our ordinance. It's 323. That's a relatively new section. It was probably approved in the last 2 years. It has very different requirements because the property owner actually has to live on a contiguous or on the property.
And I know all that, but are we updating this to kind of go along with the vacation home?
No, the vacation home rental is a separate ordinance and a separate section because it's a very different, by definition, type of short-term rental. So we have different sections because we have recreational resorts, we have specialty resorts, we have bed and breakfasts, and then we have vacation home rentals.
And I understand all that, but are we going to update the bed and breakfast, or is it okay as it is?
I don't know, it would depend on what comes out of this. I don't see too many conflicts with it at this time.
Okay.
I mean, it still falls under the short-term rental umbrella, but we have all of them have different criteria. And typically, when we meet with individuals, we require staff to have a one-on-one meeting with applicants prior to submittal of their request, just because of all of the different things that these, and how different they are. Specialty resort is different than rec resort, it's different than VHR, that's different than a bed and breakfast. So we meet with them first to see where they're at, and then that's where we go through to see which category essentially they fit into.
Under the same sort of thinking, do you see any other use of the special use permit criteria in our ordinances?
As far as for the
Could that, just the special use, the right the state gave us to have special use permits?
There are several other ones under the special use. It's living in an RV while constructing a residence. Special permitted uses include several, like police stations, fire stations, things like that.
Which could eliminate some of the meeting
Mhm.
time and actually perhaps give you more efficient use of your time in the department.
Correct. And accessory uses as a principal use, those are special permitted uses now instead of conditional uses. So there are some that are already under that category in addition to this.
Thank you. Any other questions? You're not gonna believe this. I don't have any either. Anybody care to make a I know, Karen, you won't believe it.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Yeah.
Opposed?
Before he gets a
Motion
chance.
carried. We're adjourned.